Just wait for a few more people to turn up. We're going to do like a sort of Q&A slash walkthrough session for the 21, I think. Hey, Dibbo. It is 41 degrees outside, allegedly. It feels like about 45 to me. I've just finished work for the day. I did get offered to stay back an extra hour, but I thought, nah, not in this heat. It's tempting, Dibbo. It's really tempting. I just cannot tolerate heat at all. So Nico wanted some help with the 21, which I'm happy to give him. I thought I'd kind of expand it into a whole stream of kind of walking through the aircraft. I'm going to quickly chuck some weapons on it, so I can demonstrate them as well, maybe. Just in single player at the moment. Normally I'd kind of want to demo this in multiplayer against players, but at the moment the Cold War server's empty and it's not really ideal to do that on GS or DCS where I'm facing modern aircraft. So we'll roll with this. Are you burning, son? I'm not, but apparently people just down the road are. I think the Great Western Highway's closed again. Out Lithgow way. There's a big fire out Palmer's Oakey. Hello.
So it's time for me to bind this,
Okay, so things you will immediately need.
Wait, hold on, let me turn you down and let me fire up the game.
Okay. Well, I kind of, I thought as well I could just run the stream and walk through stuff and you could watch that, and if you had any questions, ask. It's easier than me trying to picture what you're talking about if you have a question.
Okay.
Otherwise, like, I'm trying to remember where shit is or what does what. Yeah, apparently there was a photo taken from the smash repair place on the edge of Lithgow, and the entire mountain behind it was lit up. Apparently it's under control now, but I don't know, it doesn't sound good. The problem is that fire, the one up around Lithgow, that's come down from Gosper's Mountain, that one, if it keeps moving south, is going to end up threatening basically the entire Blue Mountains, like all the string of towns along the Great Western. And as well as that, it's then going to hook up with the fire ground down south. Now, I think the Green Wattle Creek fire is mostly pushing southeast now. Mum and Dad said they backburnt all the southwest front, so that's not going to burn through. The fire up by the Three Sisters has burned south into that, so that's now one fire. So yeah, who knows? It is not good, put it that way. Pretty much the only forest left in the state when this is done are going to be a few patches of state pine forest out west my parents' way, or southwest, and down like in the snowies. That's it. That's all. Everything on the east coast is burnt off. Everything. Yeah, Dibbo, it's shit. I don't know about today, but I know that, was it not last night, the night before, we lost 2 of them in a truck rollover. 5 have been badly injured. No, 6, I think. 3 in the truck rollover, and then 3 when they were caught by a spot fire. Let's chill out here on the ground for a bit. Yeah, I'm surprised. Lots of property loss, though. Like, what? In total, I think we're up near 1,000... Was it near 1,000 houses and like 2,000 ancillary buildings, like sheds and stuff? It's actually...
As someone from California, I know the pain of wildfires.
Yeah, ours are just disgusting. Like, they haven't been able to backburn or anything, so they're unmanageable at this point.
Yeah, these are pretty nasty. Yeah, you've probably heard. I don't know if you could move from the US over there, but you might have heard.
I know. Because we get a lot of your firefighters come out in the off season, then we send a lot of ours out your way.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Front's 11,000 kilometers long. Yeah. If you total up the area that's been burnt out so far, it's the entire southeast of the UK. From the Channel down by Dover all the way north to Cambridge, and west to Southampton. Probably a bit more than that by now. So, do you want me to give you the list of shit you need bound now, or do you want to go through the startup and stuff first?
Just wait. Let me load in. I'm just turning on the game. Let me go into options and let me bind my stuff. Then I'll load into a game once you go.
Yeah, well, I'm just in single player, so like I was gonna start this thing up so you can watch how I start it, and then do a bit of flying around, demonstrate some of its performance and stuff. Maybe demonstrate some weapons.
I need to change my, because this music's too loud.
Yeah, if you do go, and I'll have to try and catch it. I'm going to be streaming tomorrow as well, so I don't know how that'll line up with times, but if I'm not streaming myself, I'll definitely want to watch that. I'm halfway through that bot. It looks like a really fun game, and if you had something like a cathode one, it'd be amazing.
What do I bind for?
Okay, so bear in mind I have a Warthog, so your mileage may vary, but I have the gun trigger bound to the actual trigger.
Okay, hold on a sec. I just need one by one. So, what are these specific?
Okay, let me open up the binding menu so I can just press shift and see.
Fire gun. Okay, that's already out of.
Yep. Okay, and then like the thumb button, the big red button, that's my weapon release.
It is called weapon release,
yes,
right?
Yes, correct. Then, do you have like a index finger button on the X56?
You mean like by index finger?
Like where your index finger would naturally fall when it's not sitting on the trigger. Do you have a button that's just basically a button that's really easily accessible and quick?
I have a pinky switch.
You'd want to save that for something else. Never mind then, but you might want to bind this to something accessible. Radar ECM protection panel, IFF. It's like this is the thing. The MiG-21, everything's clickable pretty much, but a lot of it's not easily accessible in a fight.
I do have a button bar right behind my pinky switch that I could use.
Okay. Oh wait. So you got a switch and a button behind it. Yeah, no. You save both of those unless you don't really care about following the actual setup of the plane, because the pinky switch is wheel brakes. And then the button behind the pinky switch is drop center fuel pod. X56, Divo.
And the wheel brakes work with differential braking by
Yeah, you just feed in rudder, hold the brakes, it'll bias all the brake pressure to the wheel on the inside of the turn. If you've ever played any World War II sims, this is the exact same thing. Same system.
Actually, not in a very, very long time.
Yeah, so something accessible you probably want bound to the IFF. It is, like I said, it's clickable. It's front and center above the radar. It's just difficult to get to in a dogfight. Like, you don't want to be looking down, and you don't have muscle memory like you'd have in real life. What else have I got? That I don't need. If you've got like a whatever you would naturally use yourself for radar control for like the TDC or for range.
Wait, hold on. I'm just doing one thing at a time.
Okay.
Because you know the things how these aircraft kind of like to if you have like if your stick and rudder have separate plugins, it likes to double bind. I fucking hate that.
Yeah. DCS seems to have a really big problem with that. In fact, just looking at my menu now, yeah, I've got shit double and triple bound across everything.
I noticed the freaking menu music for the MiG is kind of epic.
I have music turned off in DCS, so I don't think I've ever heard it. I'll have to give it a listen sometime. I've got the MI8 menu music on one of my playlists because someone sent me it, but I've not heard the MiG-21 music.
Okay, I just got done with wheel brakes. What do I do next? You said something about radar?
Okay, so just run me through what you got so far. I'm guessing gun trigger, weapon release.
Trigger, weapon release, and wheel brake.
Okay, so the pinky button behind the pinky switch, drop center fuel pod.
Let me look for that.
It's under engine for category. And that is on the actual stick, if you'll excuse me, is this right here, which is covered by a safety cover. So you got to flip this up and then press the button in. So hence using that as the bind on my stick. I'm trying to keep things close to the real aircraft.
Fuel pod on.
Alright, so you want to then bind, if you've got like a something like a hat or something you would normally use to adjust your radar or your gun sight or whatever, like something which makes sense to you to be the TDC range, because the MiG-21's radar is fixed in azimuth. You can only range the cursor up and down. It doesn't go side to side.
What is it called?
It is TDC range / pipper span plus and minus. I think you can bind it as an axis too, but I just use a hat switch.
I'll just bind it to a fucking
Yeah, I did get your message about that game going. Sounds interesting. I've still got to get around to playing Wolfpack. I really want to play that, but I just haven't got around to it yet. I need to find people to play it with that are on at the same times as me. I've also got to try and remember how to...
span control, right?
Yes, correct. And it's like, you know how sometimes controls are listed as a reverse or whatever, it's not. So plus is increased distance and minus is decreased distance.
I just have it bound to a axis on the wheel on my throttle.
Okay. Okay, from there... Yeah, so how many buttons have you actually got on your stick? Like, buttons?
Quite a lot.
Okay, so bind one of them that's accessible near the trigger, I would say. Either near the trigger or near the weapon pickle button. Bind that to radar ECM protection panel IFF, because that is your IFF interrogate, you need that. Hey Saber. I always forget that's a thing, the low speed target. I should probably like use that sometimes. You could theoretically bind up some of the other radar functions, but I wouldn't bother. I almost never use them. And you'll see when I do my startup, I have a habit of just pressing one of the filters anyway. As for stick binds, there's only one other thing I have, which is I have a four-way hat which falls under my thumb. I think it's the, what is it, the CMS, TMS, whatever the fuck you call it, that thing. So I have that bound so that pushing forwards goes to under weapon select, select next weapon. Stick has the same as ours. It's under weapons / select, and it is select next weapon.
Oh, okay, I see.
And all this is doing is just advancing or retreating the knob that changes pylons one spot. So I didn't bind this up for a while, but I found in close combat if I needed to switch pylons for something, it was an absolute nightmare just trying to click it. So I bound it up. This is the thing with DCS, this stuff's easy to do in real life, you just reach out and click the thing, but because you're fighting the mouse in the cockpit shaking and all this shit...
I got that bound, hold on, I'm unbinding certain that they don't want bound.
Like, a lot of the stuff I've got bound to HOTAS, you don't need to be HOTAS.
Like the point of view stuff in Zaptrack IR.
Oh, I don't even bother unbinding that. I just let the track IR override it.
Although I want to use the...
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I don't know if it does it for the X56, but for the Warthog it tends to unbind a lot of stuff it doesn't actually need.
It doesn't actually unbind with this, unfortunately.
Ah. Who says that's not what it's about, Gurn?
Okay, what next?
So same thing, but previous weapon. When you pull it towards you.
Oh, I did that. I did that automatically.
Yeah, good shit. So when I push it up on the stick, I've got that weapon AA mode, IR missile. That actually, weapon AA mode, IR missile. It's under weapon/master control. I should actually bind this too. Although I'm never going to use it. Actually,
and SAR means semi-active radar, right?
Yes, correct.
So I could bind that to the same.
Yeah. So what I do is I have that four-way switch. So forwards and aft changes the position of the pylon select, and up and down changes the missile seeker mode. Because, and this is a quirk of the MiG-21, if you have a pylon selected but you have the wrong seeker mode selected, it will preference that over the pylon. So even if you have a pylon that's only heaters selected, it will fire a semi-active missile if you have SAR selected.
I see. So, okay, you're gonna have to teach me about managing storage.
Oh, it's pretty simple. You just need to remember to actually do it. Like, this is the thing. So some of the weapons logic isn't quite there. For instance, if I'm double racking R60s, it'll preference one rack and it'll leave me with a really bad asymmetric loadout because it's fired them off one wing first. Whereas I believe in real life it does alternate between the double racks. And the other thing as well is, in real life, when you've got it set to salvo mode on a missile pylon, it should fire with a slight delay, like, I think it's like 50 milliseconds or some shit. But in game at the moment it just fires both at the exact same time, and there's a chance they'll hit each other and blow themselves up right in front of you.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's
Hold on, I want to definitely want to bind countermeasures.
The MiG-19 does that rightly. Yes, but we'll get to that. I have that bound on throttle.
Okay,
okay, so if we move to the throttle, we may as well do countermeasures first. Do you have like a button that falls under your pinky? I assume you do. Dibbo says your stick's the same as ours, basically, button-wise.
Yes, I have a few. I have switches that fall under my index, my middle, and my pinky.
Okay,
and the pinky one's a two-way switch, which I can go up or down.
Well, it doesn't need to go up or down because we're living in the 70s here. We don't have the choice of which countermeasures we're spitting out. You are looking for, under the category SPRD or ASO, drop countermeasures ASO and SPS 141.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Is there anything I need a two-way switch? Actually, need a two-way switch for?
Possibly a couple things. So
okay, then I have another button I could use for my countermeasures. I've got two. I was thinking.
So probably you don't need to do this, but I do just for the sake of being lazy. It is clickable in the cockpit, but the gear lock handle I have on a two-way switch, just to save me having to click it. Or leave it off all the time, which is the other alternative. So that comes under, like, I have that as a two-way switch under my speed brake.
What does that do?
So the gear on the MiG-21 and on Soviet fighters in general is a bit different to Western gear. It sits in a neutral position and then goes up to raise, down to lower. Now, if you leave it up in the up position, it'll drain all your air pressure off, which you need for the brakes, because as the gear raises, it automatically pops the brakes to stop the wheels spinning in the wells. So you have a safety catch on the gear lever, which prevents you from moving the stick up. You can only leave it neutral and move it down. So if you want to raise your gear, you need to lift this lock, then raise the gear. Then when the gear comes up, you need to lower it back to neutral. So I've got two binds set to do this.
Okay, so just tell me what to bind. Gear handle lock engaged and released?
Yep, so on a two-way switch, just bind that up as you prefer. I have forward for released and backwards for engaged.
I have not. No, the way, so whatever.
And then I'm gonna rebind. Bear in mind, big disclaimer here. I'm gonna totally rebind this in like a week or so when I have time to work out how, because my controls on the MiG-21 are kind of arse backwards. But somewhere convenient to reach, I would put gears handle neutral. I'd bind that so that you can automatically just tab it back to neutral without having to click it.
What does neutral gear handle neutral do?
That literally just puts the gear handle back in its center position. Otherwise, if you leave it in the up position, it's going to bleed off all your air pressure and you'll have no brakes. Because it's leaving basically what it's doing, if you leave it in the up position, it leaves the brakes on in the air the whole time you're flying, so you immediately just bleed off all your pressure.
Okay, I just did that, okay.
Yeah, the brakes are pneumatic, so they're running off an air tank.
Okay, what next?
Let me think. Speed brake. If you have a speed brake switch, you should probably bind it to that. This is one of the things I'm going to rebind because on my setup at the moment it's totally ass backwards.
Speed brake. Okay, I have a bunch of two-way switches that aren't directly on the throttle but around the throttle. Like
the MiG-21 only has
Is
on
it
off.
hold?
It's a toggle. No, it's a toggle.
Oh, it's.
I wish
so
it was hold.
So I could just use one direction of a two-way switch.
Yeah, you could. That's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm probably going to change that to use the actual speed brake spring-loaded switch, just for the sake of making it match everything else. But yeah.
What's it called specifically?
Air brakes on/off. I really wish this was a three-way or a toggle like it is in the Mirage or the MiG-19. That would make my life so much easier, binding-wise. Okay, so you got that. Let me think. You probably want target lock on. Something that is convenient for you as a radar lock button.
I'll use what I use for all my aircraft.
Yeah, that's a good system. That's why I need to rebind this. It's different to all my other planes. And then you want something else, which is this is your unlock button, but it also totally resets the radar filters. Radar ECM protection panel reset. Oh shit.
Happy non-denominational secular season greetings.
Thanks, John.
Also, I extended Pom's gift sub.
Thank you,
But
man.
it didn't do an alert for that.
Debated. Thanks, man. Happy non-denominational thing to you as well.
Reset, correct?
Yeah, reset. Just say Merry Christmas. I mean, I might not be Christian, but I'll happily steal someone else's holiday if it's an excuse
bound
to
that to the
drink.
same button I use for my undesignated in every other plane.
Yeah, that works. That also, if you have any filters on the radar, like the weather filter or whatever, that will undo them. That totally resets the radar.
Okay, what next?
Give me a moment to think. Oh, you want this? Something very accessible. I have it on one of the throttle quadrant engine ignition switches. Engine emergency air start on/off. It's a single switch toggle, so this is a very important switch. You need to be able to memorize where it is and get to it very quickly.
Should I bind it on or off? On off, or can
It's
I use a two-way
only
switch to
no.
bind on or off?
It's oh wait, no, you can use the two. Oh, hey, there you go. Yeah, use the two-way then, I guess. I'm gonna rebind that right now, and that's probably gonna bring me unstuck as I forget that I've
cold
done
start.
it.
Do I want to bind that?
No.
Okay, what next?
1 second. I'm just remembering why I bound that the way I did, because fucking DCS doesn't recognize the 3 position switches on the Warthog by default. Or even the 2 positions, apparently.
kind of fucking blows.
Yeah, it does. It's why Raspberry modules all have 3-position switch abstraction categories, which is full of stuff that basically gets around that. We'll just leave that the way it was bound. That's really annoying. Okay, so that's bound. Trying to think what else. I don't think there's anything else. Yeah, I haven't unbound that yet. Probably should. If you have like an autopilot button you usually use, I haven't bound this because I just press it on the stick, but if you have an autopilot button you usually use, I would bind that to, if I can find it, 1 minute. SAU recovery.
What does that do?
That's your panic button. If you fuck up and the aircraft is in a really bad flight regime, as long as you manage to throttle yourself, if you press that button, the aircraft should right itself. That's also your lazy man's altitude and attitude hold. Basically, you press that button, the aircraft will immediately try and return itself to straight and level flight and remain in straight and level flight until you disengage it. Which on the real stick...
What does stabilize do?
Is this boy. Stabilize is the damper. You probably don't want to use that very often. It's kind of... It's not like the 29 where you need the damper on to not be twitching all over. It's kind of the opposite. With the damper on, if you try and take off all land...
Will it help me bombing?
Doubtful. It might, but I just, like, if I'm going to use it, I just click it on the autopilot panel. This is the panic button on the real stick, and this is the disengage.
I was going to hit it to the other, bind it to the other direction of the two-way switch I bound recover. Or hold altitude. I'll click that.
I wouldn't even bother. I would not even bother binding any of the autopilot stuff to HOTAS, honestly, except maybe the stabilize or the recovery. Sorry, and then SAU. See, I don't know if it's cancel current mode. I think it is SAU cancel current mode. So if like, you know the way my MiG-21 stick's laid out, the big black button on the right side of the stick, the big black thumb button, is the recovery button, and then on the left side the big red button is the cancel current mode button. So all Soviet sticks have the autopilot buttons on the stick, where an American aircraft you'd expect to find the weapon pickle and, you know, whatever else.
Yeah.
Something, conscript Air Force. But yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
So now...
Where's a good place to practice?
At the moment, I don't know. I typically, when I was practicing, I was playing like through the Inferno and stuff. But what I'll do is if you want to kind of divert your eyes to the stream for a moment, I'll show you my startup procedure and stuff, so you can watch it, and then as well as that, if you want to come back to it later, the VOD will be there. I'll save this one.
I'll unmute the tab now.
Yeah.
So I can listen.
And if you guys pick up the MiG-21 module, you can use this as a resource too. I will save this VOD. Probably on Twitch, but definitely this will be on YouTube. I might pin it, like a link to it in the Discord or something. So we are fully loaded out and ready to go. Interesting issue with the MiG-21, the landing lights are always on. I have my master power off and the landing lights are still on. It's a weird bug which has been in the game for as long as I've been playing, so over a year now. Not sure if it'll get fixed. Just let me know when you're good to go.
I'm ready. I'm just watching.
Okay, so to start the MiG-21 from cold, you obviously rearm yourself and everything, and then you have this panel down here. This is your battery heat. This goes on power bus number 1, power bus number 2. Then you move up here. This is your ground power generator kind of thing. These two you don't need to turn on now, but I do. Those are for the belly stations, so those are either your SPRD booster rockets or your ASO2 countermeasure pods. The ASO2, we'll get to that, but it's not right in DCS. They gave us the wrong thing. This is your DC generator, so equals is DC, that's the alternator. So alternator, generator. This is the power switch for the ground power. So you turn all of those on in that sequence. Then you've got your 2 gyro flight instruments. Turn those on. And you can see that wake up the ADI there and the HSD. Then you go fuel pumps, all 3. These are your 2 main fuel pumps. This is for the header tank, which feeds directly into the engine. Then this is out of order, but this is what I do. I go across pitot heat, emergency pitot heat. Sorry, this is your pitot heat, and I think this is the emergency. Then also the clock heat. Then this is your weapon release cover. I just flip that on the ground to save me for getting it later because it does matter. Your countermeasure release cover, you can't press the countermeasures if this cover is not up. Make sure this shit is up. Same with the weapon release, I think. Then you've got fire extinguisher, and this is your APU or whatever. Aggregat Zapuska. It's something to do with the starting system. I think it's basically an APU. So those 2 switches up. You come back here to the back of the throttle. You uncage the throttle. I usually just crack it slightly forwards, but it doesn't matter as long as it's uncaged. Then you hold in Zapusk Dvigatelya until this red light here comes on, which is literally ignition. So that's your engine started. At this point, I usually close the lid. When you close the canopy, you click the support strut, the canopy will close, and then you come down here, this lever, and then this lever. This blinking red light will come on if the canopy is not pressurized. Both of these need to be forwards or your canopy will fall off. You'll have a very unpleasant surprise on takeoff. So that's done. Then I come over here. This is your flaps panel. Every MiG fighter from the the MiG-19 through to the MiG-23 and MiG-29 has the same panel. There are 3 settings. This is up, ubranie, vzlyot is takeoff, posadka is landing. So when you're on the ground starting up, put it in takeoff position. That's the middle position. Depending how you start up, that might already be set, but you want takeoff flaps set. Then you come over here, this is your RSBN panel. So this is navigation stuff you don't have to do, but I generally tend to do it. The RSBN list for the Caucasus is over here. This is your channel numbers, this is your airports. So we are at, where are we? Nalchik, I think. Looks like Nalchik. So we'll go on this list, down here, channel 8, Nalchik. So we go channel 8 on the RSBN. Now the PRMG, which is your landing system, I don't really use that, so I'm not 100% sure on how it works. But this window here that says Posadka, this is your landing. Navigacja is your navigation. So say we'll just go to 8 on that. I don't know if that's even the right channel, but whatever. This is your just put them up. I don't remember entirely what they do, but put them up. This is your volume knob because the RSBN can get a bit annoying after a while. And then if you want to use primarily the RSBN over the arc compass, you flip this up. I usually do that because the RSBN is more accurate if it's set up properly. So that's everything on the left side of the cockpit done pretty much. This is your undercarriage indicator here. So that top right light, Zakrilki Vypusheny, is flaps down. The one below it should be Shitki, speed brakes. And then this one is, what is that one? I think that tells you to lower the gear when you're very low and very slow. I can't recall for sure. But it doesn't matter. So yeah, that's basically everything on the left side set up for now. So that little safety catch for the gear is this thing here. See that? How it stops it from being moved up? But I have that bound, so I just deal with that later. This is your landing lights here. So Ubrano is up. Roulege is taxi. Hey Dub, thanks for the raid, dude. And Farapasadka is landing lights. So the thing is, these don't come up and down automatically. You have to move the switch yourself. And if they're, you can overspeed them and break your landing lights. So I usually don't use them unless I need to. And as soon as I'm off the ground, wheels up, I quickly switch that into the bottom position. But I usually don't use landing lights, so it's not a big deal. Thanks again for the raid there, Dub, and welcome everybody. We're doing a quick MiG-21 tutorial. The gun, we'll get to that. Don't worry about that yet. We're just doing the basic startup, then we'll get to the gun. This here, this is your radar altimeter setting. This is off. This is 50 meters, 100 meters, 150, so on and so forth. I just usually leave it off or 50 because I fly very low. These little rotary wheels under all the warning light panels are the day and night modes. It used to be more useful when the day mode had a really bad light bleed, but now it's not. I'm gonna redo all the textures for these warnings. They're a bit rough for me. So yeah, it just switches between day and night mode on those. Most of these instruments are never going to be relevant. The bottom one is brake pressure, I think. That one is, it's an ampermeter for chassis clock, I think. Don't know why the clock would have an ampermeter. And then this is, it's pressure for something? It might be cockpit pressure. Either way, like, none of that matters. Don't worry about that. You're never going to need it. Need to learn rail units. There are some handy tricks about that, which I'll cover in a minute. So everything on the left side of the cockpit's done, and I've got to try and remember my startup here. So this is the point where I move over here. This is the volume for the arc, the radio compass. I usually turn that down, otherwise it gets annoying like the RSBN. So let's have a look at the knee board. We're at Nulchik. So our arc setting for Nulchik should be Sector 2, 3, I think. Sector 2 to Channel 3. So you look at this, look at where you are. So we're in Sector 2/2, and then Channel 3. This is the channels for the arc, not for the... Doesn't look like it. No. OBS doesn't... Oh, no, OBS does say something. Okay. It looks like my internet shut itself. What did you miss? So, I'll just go over what I just said there. Arc is like a sort of broad area radio compass. So, okay, so the entire arc. You look up where you are, or where you're going. Look at what sector it's in. This knob controls the arc. So say we're in Sector 2-2 and I want it set to my own airfield, or my own area rather. We'll set it to 2-2 on the outer scale. And then we come over here to this panel, which is the arc channels. So we are now 2-2, and Nulchik I believe is Sector, or Channel 3, sorry. So we've got Channel 3 there selected. So the arc is like a real broad stroke kind of radio navigation. And RSBN over here is a Soviet TACAN, essentially. So if the airport has an RSBN channel, and Nulchik does, this will navigate you onto the runway, and you can use this to land with instruments as well. Now, I tend to fly by the seat of my pants and navigate by VFR, so most of the time I'm only using RSBN to gauge how far away I am from home. But yeah, you can use these to navigate if that's your thing. It's all in the 21 guide. I've never actually read the navigation section, I just learnt by doing, basically. So that's set. The thing next to the arc, if you want to set it up, is your radio. You have preset channels. The preset channels are as listed here, I believe. I think you can change this in the mission editor, but generally by default, the channels are exactly what they read here. So 0 is your working frequency as such, Robochi working frequency. 14900, 15000 is Avaria, which is guard, that's your emergency frequency, that's channel 1. Then Anapa, Batumi, Beslan, Galenjik, Gudara, all your different airports have different channels there. And that's all, this is by default in the cockpit. So that's your radio. This is how you switch channels down here. That is your squelch. This is your mode switch between radio and compass. So if you have it set to radio, it turns off the arc mode, I believe. So usually just leave it set to both. And then this is your volume, this knob here. So that is your navigation taken care of now. So now we'll start going through systems. At the moment, I'll turn on some backlighting on the instruments. Your instrument panel backlighting is this knob. I usually leave it off at the moment. This is a bit glitchy at the moment. So a lot of the stuff written here should be in luminous paint, not backlit. And they've kind of fucked that up at the moment. So I don't really use that, but I do use the instrument panel lights. Your actual floodlights, if you want them, are Beli Sviet, which is white light. So this covers this panel here. There's a floodlight tucked up under there. That's your main breaker board. So that's basically, you'd only use that for when you're on the ground. Can set specific radio channels, right? No, you're stuck with presets. You can't set the channels. Where are instrument lights? Okay, this top one is instrument lights. I usually leave it kind of 3/4 of the way, otherwise it's a bit too bright. And then this is your instrument panel. So that's this one up here is your white flood for the main circuit breaker. You only use that on the ground. And then your red flood for when you want to read stuff in the air is this, Krasny Sviet, which is, as you can see, it activates the red floodlights. The lights at the moment are bugged. They're fixing that in the upgrade. So these things that look kind of like fasteners are bolts. These things in between the radar filter buttons, this thing here, this thing here, this thing here, all of these things that look kind of like fasteners of some sort, these are actually lights. There are like 100 and something individual light sources in the cockpit in the real aircraft, which isn't modeled in-game. In-game there's like 4 or 5 light sources, which is why it looks kind of like dog shit. They can't simulate the real-life lighting sources or the game would crash, basically. They tried, and they were just like, no, the performance hit's too big. Remind me later, I'll link you some photos of a real MiG-21 cockpit floodlit. Anyway, so that's your lighting if you need it. Now we go to systems. This is your nose cone. You need this on. The nose cone moves forward and backwards with airspeed to keep constant flow of air into the engine. That goes on before you get in the air. If that fails, if something happens to the nose cone and the motor driving it fails, you then have, or the automatic control system fails, there is a system, where is it? It's over here somewhere. I never use it because I've never needed to. Now I want to actually demonstrate where it is. I can't fucking find it. That's for your nozzle. I can't seem to find the nose. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Stvorki. What the fuck does Stvorki mean? I can't remember. And then konus. So this is up is automatic and down would be manual if we had an in-flight emergency. But like, all this stuff is only important if something fails, and usually you can fly without it. SPS here, it starts in the up position, leave it in the up position. This is your blown flap system, so it uses bleed air off the engine to increase the lift over the flaps. Never ever turn that off, leave that on. You really want that to land. This is your emergency nozzle control. Sopla is nozzle. I don't recall what that does, it doesn't really matter. Again, these are all emergency systems, basically, as are a lot of these. So this is your automatic wheel brake. This is your afterburner cutout switch. So if you, for whatever reason, want to isolate the afterburner so you don't trip it when you go past mill power, you flip this down. It's basically just a cutoff for the afterburner. And then this thing with a guard on it right here is your air start switch. So you should have that bound anyway, so you don't really need to click it. The N looking letter is the equivalent of P, correct? Yes. So I could run you through the alphabet if you really want, but it's not difficult to pick up. There should be plenty of resources online. Most of the letters are the same as the Latin alphabet, and a few of them are very similar. And then the ones which are really, different are easy to remember just because they're different. So anyway, nose cone is on. This is your auxiliary hydro pumps, I believe. It's something to do with the hydro pump system. That goes on. Trimmer, on. Without this switch on, you have no trim. So that stays on. So those three are critical to flight. You leave them turned on at all times, except when you're starting up and shutting down. Yeah, it's very similar to Greek if you have any familiarity with that. Because that's where Cyrillic originated from, in large part. Need to bind trim? Oh, I forgot to tell you that, yeah. You only need pitch trim. The MiG-21 does not have roll or yaw trim, only pitch. So this is your trim hat here. Exactly the same as on my real stick, just here it's moved up a bit. We'll talk about the stick in a bit. And you'll notice as I move the trim, this indicator light comes on and off. So what that says is Trimmer Effect Stabilizer. It's an abbreviation. For Trimmer Effect Stabilizer, that means it is neutral. So when that light is out, it means the trimmer is not neutral. Which way? Good luck guessing. You just move it up and down until you find that light, and then you know you're neutral. There's a bit of play in it, as you can see. Huh. You might not hear it over the music, but there's actually a clicking sound as I move the trim switch, which is true to the real thing. The real stick clicks as well. So we'll just leave that close to neutral for now. I'll talk about takeoff in a bit when we get to it. So those three switches are flight critical. Then you've got Razzia, radio. Arc is your arc radio compass, so you want those two up. RV MPN is your radar altimeter, I believe. Or radar master power, maybe. RSPN is your radio navigation, basically TACAN, as I said. So everything on this panel almost goes up, but I'm just talking you through what they do. AGD is your one of your flight instruments. I think it's the ADI. The down position there is the emergency power. So it starts in the emergency power, but you flip it up to the main power. So yeah, it should be the ADI gyro. KSI is this. So you can see as I flip that switch, the KSI starts moving, and it starts wigging out because it's trying to pick up the RSBN beacon, but it hasn't got a good signal. SAU is your autopilot, so if you want to use the autopilot at all, that goes up. KSI is course indicator, essentially. So you've got your compass, you've got your like radio navigation kind of TACAN crosshairs to tell you when you're flying to the beacon. Like this instrument does about 2 or 3 different things. It'd be probably easier if you looked it up in the manual because I don't use it that much. The manual would explain it better. This also does 2 or 3 things. You've got your landing glide slope on that, as well as an ADI. You've also got here, so this is the needle that's horizontal at the moment is your vertical speed in meters. So in meters per second. So if that's at this position, it's
okay. So, definitely need to know where that was.
Which one?
For landing.
Oh. No.
For landing,
No, you don't need the fucking glide slope. Never bother using the glide slope for landing. You can eyeball it. Like, anytime someone tells you this plane's hard to land, tell them they're an idiot and they're wrong. But yeah, I'll stop hot micing in Discord now and just go back to stream. So yeah, if you're climbing at 5 meters a second, sorry, it'll be on this mark, that's 10. So 5 here, 10, and it's kind of weird and exponential. It gets up to 20 and then it goes exponential. So you go from 20, 50, then 100, and weird shit happens. The scaling is really weird, above 20 meters a second climb or dive. So that's the needle that's horizontal with a little bell end on it at the moment. The other one is your turn indicator. So your turn, bank indicator, and vertical speed are all in the same instrument because the Soviets love combining 3 instruments into one. And then your turn indicator is this orange scale. And then your little slip ball is in there as well. You've actually got 2 slip balls, one there and one under the ADI. Yeah, she lands stable fast, essentially. I'll show you some landings, they're not difficult. I say that and I'll probably fuck them up for once in my life. So, we'll come back to the flight instruments, but anyway, SAU is your autopilot, so that goes on. SAU Tangaj is your... I think that's like your... what's that? I think that's a recovery mode or something. It's associated with the autopilot. I think it's like the recovery mode, so just turn that on. Basically, like I said, almost everything on this panel goes on. This is your heating for the missiles and the gun camera. This goes on. You can do this, these bottom 2 rows you can do in the air, but I tend to forget them and then get into a fight, so I do them on the ground. So that's your heating for the missiles. This is the launch power to your missiles. This is the power to your 1 and 2, your inner pylons, and this is the power to your outer pylons. What's coolant time limit? 25 minutes if the radar's on, 60 for standby. So that's now all of our pylons and missile heating and everything on, missile cooling, whatever. So that's all set. These are your nav lights. Bottom left, Mali is dim, Sredny is like medium intensity, and then Polny is full brightness, and then obviously the center position is off. Oh, for the missiles, I don't believe there is a time limit on the missile coolant. If there is, it's not simulated. I haven't run into it. Samopisets, this is the flight recorder. So the SARPP system is actually simulated to a degree in the module. It will save flight telemetry to a text file in the DCS save games folder. So you can leave that off. I usually turn it on just for the sake of it. It's a neat little bit of flavor. Bottom row is all weapon stuff again. Pushka is power to the gun. It doesn't mean the gun is armed, this is just power to the gun. So the gun won't fire with this switch down. Then you go, Pricel is your gun sight, but we've got that turned off, it's just the power to the gun sight. So that wants to be on. FKL is your... Sorry, FKP is your camera. It gets in the way, it doesn't do anything, I leave it turned off. It's basically just an abstraction. Usually you would not have that mounted in combat, you might in a training environment. So I just leave that switch down, and then SRZO is your IFF, you definitely want that on. These are your response lights for the IFF and stuff, so you want to see green lights coming up there. And that Morse you hear in the background is the RSBN station for Nalchik, so I'll turn it down. 3 looking letter is Z, correct. But be careful because there's an E, like a backwards kind of curvy E that looks very similar to that letter, but it's not. That is E, and then what we would identify as an E is like I. So, yeah. There's 2 E's in Russian Cyrillic. One is more of like a kind of a flourished E, I guess you'd call it, and one is just a straight E. So anyway, that is all our power taken care of for the main systems. Now we go over here. This is all IFF and RWR stuff. So SOD is the IFF reply system, I believe. That goes up. This I've never had to change. It might, depending on the mission settings, you might want to change that, but I just leave it in the down position. I've never had problems. That's the I think that's the IFF response mode. So just leave it. Then you've got here is daily 81. So that's product 81. I think that's part of the IFF system. That goes up. So that should be our IFF turned on. And now we go to SPO, which is our radar warning receiver up here. So that's the master power to that. You want that on. And then this is already up. That's the compass antenna. Just leave that alone. So nothing's painting us at the moment, so the SPO10 is being quiet. This here is the volume control for the SPO10. If you get sick of it beeping, and you will, turn it down, you'll see Zvuka Niet, which is basically muted, no sound, come on, and it just reminds you that it's muted. You've got a test button here, which tests the main lights, and then you've got two modes, night and day, and it's literally just rotating the kind of knurled ring back and forth. So in night mode, it's just using red lights instead of white. So the way this thing works, it is gimpy as fuck. That is what you'll hear when someone's locking you, and you'll see all four lights come on. When someone's painting you, if you see this light blink on a couple times, it means you're being painted from somewhere to your front left. It doesn't tell you what height, it doesn't tell you what kind of radar, it just says, hey, I'm being illuminated from the front left quarter of the aircraft. It can't see above it, it can't see below it. Like, this thing is almost useless, like just that close to being useless. So it'll ping a couple times, it'll kind of ping in groups, and the closer together the pings are, and the more rapid they are, the closer or more intense the threat is. Like, the more intense the signal is, so either it's close to you or it's a very strong radar. And then when you get locked, you will hear every MiG pilot's favorite sound. This here, Odvetsod, I think that just illuminates when you give an IFF response to somebody. It's not really relevant. Oh shit, there goes a MiG-31. So that's IFF and RWR sorted out. Then we come down here. This is the radar control panel. This light will come on red when you're out of coolant. This tells you turn the radar off before you melt it. And the radar will eventually just switch itself off if you don't. We put that in the middle position, that is standby. You don't need to do this on the ground. I usually do it out of habit, but you can wait until you're in the air. The radar takes a while to warm up, which is why I do it on the ground. So that comes up into the center position for standby. This is your altitude mode. So at the moment, with it fully down, it's in normal mode. It's looking, I think, 3 degrees below the nose, and then like 20 something above it, I think 28 degrees above it or something. If you put that in the center position, it's medium altitude mode. You can't see a target that's below you at all because the antenna is pointing slightly up. If you put it in low altitude mode, the antenna is pointed quite far up. You will not see a target off your nose unless it's above you. So, like, literally the way this thing avoids ground clutter is just by tilting the radar up. That's the extent of what you could call antenna elevation in the MiG-21. Vacuum tubes, yes, vacuum tubes. Everything in this is vacuum tubes. I don't believe there's a single transistor in this aircraft. So then we come across to the third button, or third switch, correction. This is your fixed beam. This is almost exclusively used for two things. One is the RS-2US, which is a meme missile, never carry it unless you're doing it for comedy value. The RS-2 is the first ever Soviet air-to-air missile. It is a beam-riding radar-guided missile. That sounds terrible. It is even worse when you actually try and use it. It's fucking beam riding. It is only to be used basically against non-maneuvering bombers from close range. Against a maneuvering target, forget it. So that's one use. The other use is the Grom, which is one of those converted to an air-to-ground missile. Now the Grom is actually useful, but it's still beam riding. So that's basically the only time I want to use fixed beam. I've heard of people using it to range the gun sight, because it's difficult to hold a radar lock if someone's maneuvering, but I don't bother. The radar gun sight in this is not great. It's mostly intended to be used against bombers. So that switch you can pretty much forget about. You're almost never going to use it unless you do ground attack. I think it can also be used for the rockets. I think there's kind of an abstraction in the module where it ranges rockets based on the radar when in real life it doesn't, or something like that. But anyway, that's everything on the right side of the cockpit dealt with. These are all circuit breakers which you can't click, sadly. But everything there is taken care of. For future reference, this thing here is your emergency canopy jettison, this big thing here. And this is your emergency gear. You pull the handle out and rotate it to pop the gear down. That is the main gear. The nose gear is separate. You pull this handle for the nose gear, for the emergency. As I said before, these are your pitot heat. This is your tactical jettison. Taktическая spross. And then vzriv is explode, and then if you move it up, it goes to the not explode position, to the just jettison without fusing position. I never use that because I basically never do air to ground, and I don't really care if my shit explodes or not. There's also an emergency launch for the air-to-air missiles there. If for whatever reason the button on your stick fails to do it, this covered button here is an emergency release for the missiles, like a proper fire button, I mean. So that should be all of that taken care of. Now that we've got the aircraft started, we're going to go over to this button here that says KSI, and we're going to hold that to align the KSI. You'll see it stopped wigging out there. So that's all set up now. This flag with K on the ADI, that means it's picked up the radio beacon. So if you're using, say, the RSBN and you don't see that flag, it means that it doesn't see the RSBN station and it's not active. When you get in range of the RSBN and you pick it up, you'll see this K flag pop out, and then you'll know that you're on course. You can follow the RSBN needle then. So the needle with the circle on the tail is the RSBN, which, you know, I follow that if I'm trying to nav back to the airport. What else have we got? So this thing here, so the actual jettison for your belly tank is behind this cover, which I think I've showed you on the real stick. That is a spring-loaded safety cover in real life, and the button's under it. So your belly tank jettison is, that's why I bound it to the stickers, because it's inaccessible to click. And your wing tank jettison is under this cover here. The thing that looks like a bomb, that's your wing tank jettison. This red thing here is your master caution light. If that's blinking at you, something bad is happening. Usually, sometimes it goes off for no reason at all. This is all like training modes and screen tests for the radar. You don't need that. This panel down here, okay, so we'll cover this one first. This is the autopilot panel. I forget what that does. I don't use this very often, so bear with me. I think that's the disengage. I forget what that does. This is the damper. Stabil, this is the damper. So this needs to be off to take off or land, or the aircraft will do unpleasant things, because the damper will fight you for control of the aircraft. Make sure this light is off anytime you take off or land. In flight you can activate it. It does smooth it out sometimes, but I usually don't bother. These are your landing modes. Direct and automatic. Direct on the left, automatic on the right. I don't use them. I don't trust automatic landing systems. I do it by hand. If you want to do it, it's in the guides, so I'd read up there on it. Now these switches here, this is your aileron booster. That starts on, you leave it on. Just leave it on. Now the MiG-21's roll rate, if you command a full roll, is insane. You'll black out. So what I did was I just put an aggressive curve on the roll axis of the stick instead of switching that on or off. Just leave that switched on. It's important. This thing here is your yeet switch. This is the other thing you might want to bind, depending how much close combat you get into. This yeet switch here engages the second afterburner. The MiG-21 BIS has the R13 F300 engine, which has been upgraded. With this off, the MiG-21 BIS has a thrust-to-weight ratio of like 0.8 or 0.8 something, which is okay but not great. With this on, it's slightly above 1. Every minute of engine operation with this switch engaged is worth a life. An hour of the engine life. Like, you burn through engine life hours so much. Now, in DCS, that doesn't matter. It doesn't care. All it means is you run out of fuel faster. In real life, if you have this switch on for more than about 3 minutes, you're going to melt your engine. What's the bind called? Let me check. Emergency afterburner on. So I have that bound to a 3 position, so I can switch it on and off, and I know positively from where the switch is whether it's on or off, because you don't want to leave that on when you're not using it. It's very powerful. The aircraft will run away from you. So as you can see, it's bound on my HOTAS. We'll leave it off for now. I only engage that if I'm in a dogfight, essentially. And even then I try not to overuse it. That is like the MiG-21 equivalent of holding the paddle in the Hornet. If you use this in real life for more than 3 minutes, your fucking ground crew would be after you with pitchforks, because you would have just burnt the engine out. But again, in DCS, the only real reason not to leave it on is fuel limitations and overspeeding, which we'll come back to. So we've got the KSI set. This is your navigation mode. Dalny is far, Blizhny is close. That's for the radio beacons. I don't fuck with that because I mostly use the RSBN as a way to find my own airport. I usually don't navigate by it, so if you want to read about this, it's in the guide. You'll have to read up on it there. This big thing here is the switch between the working robochi and emergency avarini pitot tubes. It's kind of weird. The long tail is what it's on. I thought it was the other way around, but the long tail is what it's on. So it's on robochi at the moment, working. And then if we want to switch it to emergency, we switch it this way. But we leave it on working. The working pitot tube is this big fucking spear motherfucker coming off the nose. The emergency pitot tube is that right there. So if you get hit and you see this thing crumple up, and that does happen, you'll see this like get smashed up. You hit this and switch to the emergency pitot tube right there. We already covered that. It's the volume for the SPO. You got an accelerometer here, reset switch. This is the most important instrument in the entire aircraft. This right here. Well, okay, this, and sometimes this. This is your angle of attack. You will notice it is redlined at 28 units. I don't know if they're degrees or units, but either way, it's on the nose, so it's a bit sketchy. It's redlined at 28. That's wrong. It's a huge safety margin. You have like a 5-degree safety margin. The actual stall angle of the MiG-23 is like, MiG-21 is like 22, 23, 32, 33. I can't words. So when you're in a real tight turn, you want to hold that needle pegged right here between 32 and 33. You watch this thing like a fucking hawk, because if you go just the slightest bit too far, you stall. If you go the slightest bit out of that, you're not getting a good turn out of the aircraft. So remember that 32 to 33 is your magic number. Now with that said, you have these two blinky boys either side of the windscreen, but if you're looking behind you at somebody trying to, if you're in a 2-circle fight and you're watching out the top, you're not going to see that shit. But these will start flashing when you move past 20 degrees or 20 units, and they will come on solid when you stall the aircraft. You'll know you've stalled because the aircraft will start going down instead of up. It's got a really gentle stall. It doesn't drop a wing. It doesn't really buff it much, which is one of my complaints. Excuse me, talking myself hoarse. One of my complaints about this module is that it doesn't have the rattles and shakes of the Tomcat. It's just always shaking slightly, Whereas in the Tomcat, you know the aircraft's not happy. In this, you have to be watching your instruments, which I really don't like. I want this thing to be like the Tomcat, where you can feel it. Unless, you know, you have a force feedback stick, in which case you can literally feel it. So that's your most important gauge right there. Your fuel is important as well. We burn most of the way through our belly tank just idling here. So with a belly tank, you carry about 3,800 kilograms of fuel. This is in, liters. This is in liters, not kilograms. So about 3,800 with a belly tank. Full internal is, I believe, 3,000 or 2,800. But we'll get to that in a second. And then when you get below 1,000, you want to start turning back for home. This is your EGT up here in hundreds of degrees Celsius. This is your hydraulic system pressure, main on the right, booster on the left. So if your flight controls are feeling a bit funky, you might want to check this. My screen just flashed for a second. That was weird. These two covers here are for your jettison. So the left one is the inner pylons, I think, and the right one's the outer. I could have that backwards, but those are your pylon jettisons. How many liters is Bingo used to by weight? So I would say probably 1,000 I'd start turning for home. 800 is your real fuck, I need to turn around, and you will get an actual warning lamp come on at 450. It comes up with a Starless 450, which is 450 liters remaining. It's bright red. It's impossible to miss. It's like the top left one or something where you cannot avoid seeing it. 450 liters gives you just enough if you're near the airbase to get home and maybe have enough for a go around. I should note, this thing's actually pretty good on fuel if you're really high up, but on the deck, it burns through it like crazy. So, we'll come back to the warning lights, but yeah, that's your fuel, EGT. This is your revs here, revolutions per minute. You'll notice there's two needles in a single engine aircraft. The MiG-21's engine is a dual spool design, so you've got two spools inside the compressor stage. One will typically lag slightly behind the other. So don't worry about that. At idle, it's more noticeable, but if I say run the engines up, we'll just put the emergency brake on. We'll run the engines up. You'll see that the first spool starts catching up to the second. And once you get up to just past 80%, they pretty much merge with each other. You can hear that hiss, that's the brakes. Every time you apply the brakes, it vents the air into the atmosphere, so you don't want to be holding the brakes down any more than you have to. You tactically apply them, otherwise you end up without them, which is not pleasant in this aircraft. This is your oil pressure warning lamp, so if this comes on, bad shit's happening. This little window here with the three sort of ticker counters, this is your RSBN distance in kilometers. So if you are hooked into the RSBN station, which I am here, it'll come up with distance. Now I'm within 100 meters of the beacon, so it's sitting, you know, pretty much on 0, but as I fly further out from the airbase, you'll see that ticking up, and as I fly back towards it, you'll see that tick down. Throttle response is laggy because it's a dual spool. Almost all dual spools are laggy. Two-stage compressors are typically laggy, but they're more resistant to compressor stalls. I've compressor stalled this aircraft like 2 or 3 times ever. It is really hard to do. Really hard. And it recovers from it very easily. So that's all that. Those are your engine instruments. As I said, this is your VSI and turn bank and slip. This is your ADI and glide slope. This is your general purpose navigation instrument. You've got a clock down here, analog clock. This is a dual purpose gauge as well. So the fat needle is your current speed in Mach, so your current Mach number. And then your, you can't see it because it's both in the same position, but there's a thin needle as well. The fin needle is true airspeed in hundreds of kilometers an hour, or thousands of kilometers an hour, correction. So say the fin needle is on 1.6, we're doing 1600 kilometers an hour true. We'd have to be quite high to be doing that, otherwise bad shit will happen. I'll come back to that. The fat needle, if it's on, say, 1.8, we're doing Mach 1.8. This is your airspeed indicator in kilometers an hour. So it winds through to 900 and then up to, when it gets to 1000, when it comes back up to 0, the top window where the 0 is pops to a 1. So say we're doing 1200, you'll see a 1 in that window, and then the needle will be on 12. The small needle will be on 12. Sorry, yeah. No, large needle. This is your altimeter. Now, this is where you've got a handy trick for people that don't know metric measure, but fly with a metric cockpit. This is instrumented in metric. So the outer scale is hundreds of meters, the inner scale is kilometers. So, say the short hand's on the 5 and the long hand's on the 4, we're at 5,400 meters. But, if you read the small hand on the outer scale, it's roughly how many tens of thousands of feet you are. So say your small hand is on the 10, and you just kind of draw that across to here, 3,300, 33,000 feet. There you go. So 10,000 meters is about 33,000 feet. And I don't know if it's roughly calibrated all the way around, but certainly up to about 33,000 feet, it is roughly correct if you read it that way. So that's a quick kind of cheat for doing that. This is your radar altimeter in meters, so that's where that is. This big thing, avarini tormoji, is brakes, emergency brakes. I kind of use it as a handbrake, but that's not what it's for. What's the thing below that? That's for the this I don't use because I don't use the rocket boosters, but I believe that's the jettison button for the rocket boosters, or the fire button for them, maybe under there. Like I said, I don't use them. You don't need them really. Opasna Visota, this is your low altitude warning lamp that comes on. It's not on the radar, it's up here. You also get a tone, which is basically the same as this. And if this and the radar are going off at the same time, it is fucking ear bleeding, believe me. So, this switch here is your nose wheel braking. Up is for normal sort of ground handling, and to the right is locked. So when this switch is on the horizontal position, your nose wheel is included in the braking. When it's up, the nose wheel doesn't brake, and that, you know, you can use it to free caster. It just makes taxiing easier if you have the nose wheel braking system off. This, I can't remember what it does, nothing important because I never use it. This is your anti-ice, which isn't functional because DCS doesn't simulate icing on the canopy, unfortunately. This here is the ARU indicator. This is a weird instrument. Really weird instrument. I can't explain it very well. If you want to read up on what it does, check the guide. But essentially what this does is it shows the ARU between long arm and short arm. And the ARU, which, if I can find it, the ARU does have a manual switch. I think it's this one. Yeah, ARU, high speed, low speed. And then the center position's automatic. So what the ARU does is it's proportional control. So if we go external view, you'll see that at low speed I have full control deflection. Now, if we're at high speed, the ARU stops me from doing that in order to avoid me overstressing the aircraft. You'll also know that's on in low speed mode because you'll see that warning lamp come on above the trimmer light. This just means that the ARU is in takeoff and landing mode, which means you have full control authority. Generally, you don't have to worry about that. If that system fails, you have really, really, really big problems. It's still flyable, it's just bad shit. You want to be moving pretty slow. and very gently on the stick. So that's what that indicator shows. It's in some weird, like it's instrumented very weirdly. The bottom scale is equivalent altitude in kilometers. The top scale is speed in thousands of kilometers an hour. It's fucking bizarre. I don't remember how to read it. This is your nose cone position up here. So you'll see that moving back and forth with airspeed changes. You don't need to worry about that. It just shows the nose cone is actually working. There is actually a warning lamp somewhere down here for when the nose cone's not. In fact, where's the test button? Test, test, test. I do recall there being one. Oh, you just push it in. So here we can see all the warning lamps. So if we start here on this panel, the top one is the marker for when you're overflying the marker at the end of the runway. That will come on. You'll hear a kind of beep, 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 and that lamp comes on. That just means you're over the marker for the ILS. Connor's Vipushin, that tells you that the nose cone is, I can't remember if that tells you the nose cone is in its high speed position or if it tells you it's failed. I think that's the high speed position. As I said, the one below is the ARU control authority in takeoff and landing mode. The one below that is your trimmer in neutral. Come over to this panel. The top left is engine ignition. The one below it is first stage afterburner. The one below that is the DC generator being out. Below that, požár is fire. Below that, sledy давление booster system. It's the boost pressure is like there's something wrong with it. Go over to the top right. Расходный бак is the header tank, which is like 80 liters. That's what feeds the engine when you're inverted. So that's also your emergency get on the ground now fuel. If that light comes on, you're about to flame out. Второй форсаж is your secondary afterburner, the emergency system. Hey, Captain Anoni, thanks for the follow, dude. Welcome to the stream. The one below that is the AC generator being out. So the generators are denoted by symbology. DC is an equal sign, AC is like a tilde. Below that, fucking stvorky, I cannot recall. I think that might be for the afterburner can position. I think it used to say sopla открыть, but they changed it. Reading Cyrillic made my morning. I know just enough to get myself in trouble. I'm not fluent in Russian though, sadly. And then the bottom right is your main hydraulic pressure. So the two bottom ones that are in amber, if those come on, you're in real big trouble. The panel below that is your fuel tanks. So the top one is the belly tank. So when you're on the belly tank, that light will be out. When the belly tank starts to empty, you'll see it kind of blinking on and off like this. Just that top one. And then when that top one comes on solid, it means the belly tank's empty. You can punch it off. You'll need to retrim the aircraft once you do that. Holy shit, we're getting a host as well. Thank you. So below that is the number one tank, which I think is the main fuselage tank. Then you've got a Starless 450, which is your that's 450 liters remaining. That is your go home right now light. If that comes on, you need to start seriously thinking about a diversionary airfield.
Meow.
Thanks for the sub there, Nico. Resub even, 2 months. And then the one below that is your third tank. They're both fuselage tanks. I can't remember which is where. I think the number one tank's in the front, the number 3's in the back. So those are your main warning lamps. Then down here you've got the status lights for the pylon. So this is all weapons system stuff. It doesn't really matter. You don't need to pay attention to this. It basically, if you have a hung store, this will tell you, but I don't think hung stores are simulated. Usually the only time I consult this is this top right one, Podveska Baka. That's your belly tank. So if this light is out, it means the belly tank's been jettisoned. So I just confirm that it's jettisoned by making sure this lamp's out. The one beside it, this one here, is for the wing tanks. I usually don't carry wing tanks, so it doesn't matter. You might also see these lights blink out if you're carrying air to ground stores and you overstress them. The rocket pods will fall off at like 6.5 G, I think it is. Yeah, hung stores might be simulated, but I've never seen it happen. But I have overstressed the rocket pods. I don't think you can overstress the air-to-air missiles. You can in the MiG-19, I don't think you can in the 21. So that's your warning lamps. And then, as I said before, you've got the 3 over here as well. Actually, Inoni will be able to remind me what the one I forgot is. So over here we've... Oh, actually, yeah. No, I was right. Pusti chassis. It's basically lower your gear. Or the gear is lowering. And then, as I said, Zakrilki is flaps, Shitki is air brake. So that is pretty much all of that covered. We'll just talk through the stick briefly, and I'll talk you through the differences between a 3rd gen and 2nd gen stick. So the 3rd gen stick, the trim hat sits a little higher. This is trim hat, only pitch trim on the MiG-21, and the 23. Both of them only have pitch trim. This big red button here is the autopilot disengage. This will cancel all current autopilot modes. So you press that, autopilot says goodnight. This one here is the panic button, return to level. So no matter what the aircraft's doing, if you press this and hold it for like a second or two, the aircraft should try and return to level flight. This button here is the radar lock button. My stick doesn't have this because this is from the 3rd gen aircraft. And then here you've got the weapon release button, which on my stick is something different because the 2nd gens I think just use the trigger for it. I don't believe the 2nd gen aircraft had an internal gun. The PFM might have, I don't think so though. So that's why it has this safety cover. So that's my weapon release for the missiles. As I said, your belly tank jettison is here, and this big lever is the brake lever. Do you have a MiG stick? Yeah, dude. Give me a second, I'll quickly change scenes. I do have a MiG stick, 2nd generation, so probably a PF or a PFM. It's in a little baggie down here because I suspect it might have asbestos insulation on the wiring. So if I show you compared to the in-game one, you see this little safety cover and then the button there, that's your belly tank jettison. The trigger flips down, as in the real aircraft. In the DCS module, that's kind of simulated. So this flips down, and there's a little button behind it, which this just acts on as a lever. The trigger's not actually the actuating force, the button behind it is. And as I said, in the PFM, I think that's just for the missiles. I don't think that's a gun trigger. Because in this, you notice this button, the thumb button, has a safety cover. That's your weapons release. In this, it's labeled as Demprovanie Setki PF. So Anoni would probably be able to translate that better than me because it's got abbreviations in it. I don't know what it is. But it's some kind of damper for something. And then Setki makes me think it's for the gun sight. Because Setki is usually, or Setka is usually what the gun sight's referred to. Right, I don't know if the camera will focus. Right there. See if I can get it to focus in on it. So yeah, on the 21 bis, that's your weapon release. On the top here, we got some more writing. This is your return to horizon. So there it just says engage, return to horizon. So that's your panic button with the big bell cover over it. This is your trimmer, and then this is the autopilot shut off or disengage. So similar to the one we have in game, they got nice clicks on them, real good positive clicks on all these buttons, and the trim hat too. So if you look at the in-game stick, there's an extra button there for the radar lock, which this one doesn't have. And that's why in-game as well, the trim hat sits a little higher on the stick. This was damping. What's it damping for? Is that like a... I thought it might have been a cage button for the gun sight, maybe. Because of the set key bit, but I'm not sure. Like for the F5? Ah, okay. Yeah. And in the real aircraft, you would have this sitting in a big stick extension, and then the brake lever is attached to the stick extension, but this has been taken out of it, so it doesn't have it. And then you've got these 8 little micro switches here, which I believe are they're pressure sensitive to disengage the autopilot in a like a certain channel. So if you push forward on the stick, it disengages the pitch autopilot. So what I'm going to do with this, probably over the coming months, is I'm going to unscrew this big part down the bottom, take this out and unwire it from the top. So I've had the cover off before, I've seen the wiring in there. It's not too bad, but we're going to take the wiring out and just keep this somewhere safe. I don't want to throw it out. I'm keeping all parts of the stick that I remove. But we're going to take all that out and try and rewire it to like a spare Warthog base or something, so I can actually use this when I fly the 21. So that'll be a bit of a project for me. And now the camera's not focused. Hello, we're gonna do the focus. There we go. So we'll just go back to DCS. So yeah, as you can see, this stick's very similar, but it's a little taller because that extra button that's been added. The MiG-23 stick is very similar, but the MiG-23 has another, like a slew sensor under the autopilot disconnect, which was used for the Kh-23 guided missile, and was also used for the Miotka mode, which is kind of a very early close combat mode for the radar, which I can talk through next time I fly the MiG-29 or the Flanker, since they both have something similar. Yeah, we're getting the 23. Razbam are working on that. 23 MLA, which makes me a very happy boy because the MiG-23 is probably one of my favorite aircraft of all time. Let's recenter my track aisle. Okay, so we are now actually coming onto internal fuel, and as I told you, the belly tank light is flashing because it's just sucking the last fumes out of the tank. And when that comes on solid, it means the belly tank's empty. So 3,000 litres is our internal capacity. Belsimtech working about Mi-24. Belsimtech and ED are basically the same now, I believe. I think ED kind of just absorbed the entire Belsimtech, but yes. I think they've got some programmers working on the World War II birds, and then some working on that, and then, you know, some working on finishing the F-16. So I don't know when we're going to get the 24, but I'm hoping it's relatively soon because I really want to fly in that thing. It's one of the few helicopters I'd really go out of my way to learn to fly, I think. So yeah, we've got that all set up. Now this is something I usually do on the ground just to save time, but you can do it in the air. Is the top right button here is the meteorological filter for the radar. That filters out clouds. I just turn that on and leave it on. The one below it is, it says Spros, which means like drop, basically, and that just cancels all the radar filters and drops the target. So when I press my unlock button, that's what I'm pressing. So there's a good kind of sight word for you. Spros means drop or jettison. So there you've got Spros Krylia Bakov, which is wing tanks. Jettison wing tanks. And then this switch on here, it's the label on mine's faded so you can't read it, but it usually says Spros Bakov. So that is the weather filter for the radar. I can't remember what the other ones are. There's a whole bunch of them. I almost never really use them. This one is the low speed filter, I think, for when a target doesn't have a high closing speed with you. I think that's what that one does. Then you've got... Actually, hang on. Which is the IFF? No, that's IFF. My bad. Yeah, IFF. I forget what that does. I think that's a test button. Well, that's a no, that's a test button. That's what that is. That one there is test. This is your passive jamming filter. The active jamming filter, I don't use the radar that much in this thing, so read up in the guide if you want to know the ins and outs of it, but basically the main one you use is the cloud filter. Then you've got these 3 status lights. These are for the IR missiles. These basically tell you the seeker head sees something. I forget which missiles correspond to which lights, because the way it's labeled and the way it actually works are 2 different things. The wonder of upgrades. But yeah, like, if you see one of these lights come on and hear tone, you know the missile can see something. So now we move on to the ASP gun sight. It is turned on master power down here, Pritzl. It's turned on, but we then turn this on to get the actual pipper, as you can see there. And you use this knob to adjust the pipper brightness. The other switch down here is the fixed net scepter. I usually leave that on and then just turn the brightness down with this little knob, the small one down the bottom left here, just because when I'm in a guns fight, I'm using that more than I'm using the gyro pipper. The gyro is kind of shit at close range. It's better used to engage like bombers. Against a hard maneuvering fighter, it's not very accurate. So I use the fixed net and kind of just use the old classic TLAR sighting system. That looks about right. Likewise, the radar assistance mode for the gun ranging is shit. I don't use it. This sliding scale here is your gun range. It's not going to do it because I don't have the radar turned on, but you'll see this slide left and right with gun range. This here is the wingspan of the target. So say we're fighting a B-52, you'd set that up to like whatever it is, 50 meters or something. But I usually just leave it down at about 9 because I'm usually fighting other fighters. And then this is your angle offset. I believe this is for the reticle depression for air-to-ground stuff, so I don't use it. And then you've got listings here, so you've got I think that's the texture resolution's a bit low because of my settings. I think that's supposed to be an S, so that might be for the rockets. And then you've got 12.7 gun pods, Gesha 23, which is your own gun, your 23mm gun. And then you've got, actually no, correction, those are the rockets. S5M, S5K, and then S24. So the bottom positions there are for the rockets. I'm not sure what the top one is then. Missile, maybe. Oh, probably for the Grom. Like, I have to put it out there, I don't really do air-to-ground, especially in this thing, so I'm not familiar with what these are. So we have a reticle. Good start. We move over here. With this lever down, the sight is in gyro mode. We flip that up into, into missile mode. You see this light come on just because, oh, I got the hiccups now. Good shit. This is your, oh my god. This is your launch authorization, basically. This light will come on when the missile has a good lock or you're in shooting range. The one on the opposite side, Vichud, is your breakaway light. So when this light comes on, it's telling you you're too close, fuck off, get away before you mid-air them. But you can fire the gun with it in missile shooting mode, so I usually just leave it in missile mode, unless, say, I'm engaging a very large, slow-moving target, and then I switch it into gyro. There's also, again, this is one of these things, you need 2 switches to do this. Even if this is in gyro, if it's in RS mode here, it will not activate the gyro sight because it's in missile mode. So this goes into missile mode, then this goes into missile mode, which it starts on by default. If you want to use the gun sight with the gyro, this down, this up. When it's in the NO position, that's the gyro gun sight. Now, this is also set up so that if you have it set to realistic, which I do, the reticle will not track a heat source. So your only indication that one of your heaters has a lock on is the tone and the status light here. But with the realistic mode turned off, you will see it track a heat source. Now it will track something you've locked with the radar. That's normal behavior. So if you've got someone locked up with the radar, you'll see the gun sight start to follow them when it's in the correct mode, which it is now. It follows them mostly for elevation. It won't follow them for azimuth. So don't don't get hung up on looking at the Pipper to try and see where your target is. They might be up here, and the gun sight will just be up here in the center. This is for firing rockets or guns or missiles, and then bombs. So B is bomb. Just flip that down for bombs. Top is automatic, bottom is manual. So you flip that into manual for manual range finding. Hey, Star Pilot. Just walking Nico and anyone else who cares to listen through the MiG-21. I've already been through that. So I think we've covered pretty much everything else. Ah, Lucas, okay. I think a bunch of you guys have changed names. I'm having trouble keeping up. But, yeah, so we've covered all that. Pretty much all we've got to go now, I think, unless I've forgotten something really important, is the weapons control panel. So, remember how I said you want to bind something so that you can switch pylons? That's this. It has 3 lobes, if you will. The inner scale on the left is for rocket salvos. The scale on the outer left is for bomb salvos by pylon. So pylon 1 and 4, or 1 through 4 is drop all your bombs at once. 3 and 4 are the outer pylons, and 1 and 2 are the inner pylons. So the numbers are 3, 1, 2, 4, looking at the aircraft from the front, which is a bit weird, but it's standard Soviet practice. The MiG-23 is numbered the same way. So if you don't do ground attack, forget those, you never need them. Then we come up, this is for the S-24 rockets, the real big boy beefy rockets, and that just selects pylons 1 to 2 and 3 and 4. Then you've got your SS is heat-seeking missile, RNS is semi-active radar homing missile. So if you want to fire them singly, say, what I usually do is I set pylon 3, which is the outer pylon on the left wing. And then I can quickly tab between the other pylon on the right wing to balance the loadout, or back to pylon 2 to fire off my inner pylons, which are usually radar-guided missiles. So you want to have it selected to the right pylon, but you've also got 2 salvo firing modes for both the outer and inner pylons. So 3 and 4 is the outer 2, and 1 and 2 is the inner 2. Now, if you have 3 and 4 salvo selected, and you're carrying the double-racked R60s like I often do, it will only fire 1 pair, so you don't have to worry about it firing all 4. But as I said before, the salvo mode on the air-to-air missiles is not correct at the moment. They fire literally at the same time. There should be a very slight delay. I think they come off the left pylon first, I seem to recall, in real life. But if you look at archive footage of any Soviet interceptor firing missiles in salvo, the left, or I think it's the left, one wing comes off and then the other comes off like half a second later. It's just so that A, the missiles don't hit each other, and B, it doesn't ditch too much mass off the aircraft at once. It makes it a little easier to maintain control. So in game at the moment, that's bugged. It will fire them both at the same time, and there is a good chance they will hit each other right in front of you and blow you up. Don't use it. Just manually do it. So, I'll switch between 3 and 2 if I want to switch between heat-seeking and radar missiles. The other reason I'll do that is if, with the R60s on the double racks, it will fire them both off the same rack unless you alternate it. So, say I fire it fire 1 from pylon 3, I'll then try and switch to pylon 4 so I can equalize it so it's 1 off each rack. Otherwise, it doesn't make the aircraft hard to fly, it's just annoying because there's no roll trim, so the aircraft's constantly trying to roll over to one side. So you want to have that set for whatever missile you're carrying. And then you've got the master mode switch here. Vozdukh or Zemlya. Zemlya is ground, so Vozdukh, up, is where you want it for air-to-air work. Then you've got your missile seeker mode. Now, as I was telling you before I started the stream, this needs to be in the right position because it will preference this over this. It doesn't matter if I have pylon 3 selected. If this switches in the down position and I try to fire a missile, the R3 will jump off the inner pylon. So you set the pylon and then you set this. The center position is neutral. Now, I'm not entirely sure if neutral just means it'll fire what's on the pylon specifically, or if that's just like a kind of safe mode. I don't use it because I didn't have it bound until now. So up, SS for heat seeker, RNS down for semi-active. So if I'm expecting close combat, I'll fly with pylon 3 selected and that switch in the up position. If I'm expecting to engage something that's either not threatening to me, or I'm expecting to be using my radar missiles, I'll fly with that down and pylon 2 selected. And then it's just a simple thumb motion for me the way my controls are set up to change that. Now in the real aircraft, I mean that's easy to reach, right? It's not a big deal to switch. But because we're working with a finicky mouse and the cockpit's often moving and the track IR's moving, it's easy to just find it. So that should be pretty much everything. We're going to quickly top off the fuel. So we'll get rid of this belly tank. And then put a new one on. Just wait until they've actually done it. There we go. So you got two sizes, 490, which are the wing tanks, can also be mounted centerline, and the 800 liter, which is a belly tank. The 800 liter can only be carried on the belly. Now, quick note about the wing tanks as well, they only go on the outer stations, pylons 3 and 4. You can't carry them on the inner ones. The countermeasure pods go on pylon 6. The ASO2 is your countermeasures. The SPRD-99 is the rocket booster. You can use the rocket boosters if you really want to. You don't really need them on corpuses, the runways are all long enough. It's kind of good for meme value, but I don't usually use them. It just adds another thing to worry about with the aircraft. And the thing is, the MiG-21's easy to fly, and it's very easy to land, in my opinion, but it's actually hard to take off because you have to juggle like 4 or 5 different things at once. You've got to have, you know, you got to bring the gear up quickly, got to get the flaps up, got to get the safety latch on. Like, there's all this shit I do when I'm taking off. So for me, takeoffs tend to be a bit wobbly, but my landings are much better. So that's the ASO2, and as I said at the startup, those 2 switches there control power to the belly stations. But I don't know if they fixed this bug yet, but a couple months ago, if you had those switches off, it didn't matter, they'd still fire the flares. The big thing for whether the flares work is this button here. If this safety cover is down, you can't punch flares off, so you want that up. Okay, so we're going to set trim until we'll go past neutral, and then just a little bit more. That should be good for takeoff. The flaps are already set to take off, so I'm going to start taxiing. Just double check everything, canopy's locked and pressurized, we should be good. They haven't put the belly tank on yet. Oh no, they have. They just haven't reset my gauge here. I'll do it myself. In real life, this wouldn't self-reset, the pilot would do this, but in DCS it self-resets just as an abstraction. So you can hear me just tapping the brakes to steer. Still too damage, yeah. I hear that a lot. I also hear the, hey, what are you doing a lot. I mean, it's the same thing, just different languages. Okay, so generally when you're taxiing, just a brief tap of the brakes is enough to make a turn. If I want to make a really sharp turn, so say we'll do a bit of a 360 here, I'll give myself some room, and then I hold the brake and put the power on. More power gives you a tighter turn with the wheel brakes. You get up to this kind of speed and it turns really well. Don't do this though, because you'll bleed off the brake pressure real fast. I might be landing without brakes because I did this. Forgot to switch keyboard over. Yeah, it's honestly the MiG-21 was the fastest and easiest aircraft for me to learn. And it's the one I always remember. No matter how long it's been since I flew it last time, I always remember it. It just seems to work with how my brain is wired up. I cannot wait until the MiG-23. I'm going to be so happy when that thing comes out. So we've had our radar on standby for like 2 hours now. That's probably not going to go well. For a sharper turn, just hold the brake longer. Just tap it for a small correction. My throttle friction is really off at the moment. I might just reset that. So we'll just line up basically in the center of the runway. So my usual check routine before takeoff is check flaps are set to takeoff, check the air brakes in, check that everything over here looks like it should be on, or everything that it should be on looks like it's on, engine is running, takeoff trim is set, basically the trim is out of neutral. And then one other thing I often do as I'm turning onto the runway is I will move the safety cover on the landing gear lever. So we'll hold the brakes, power on, just flip this to the nose wheel braking position so that if we need to abort we have full braking power, and then into burner. I'm watching my airspeed indicator here, watching for about 280, 300. Pull that, not too hard or you'll tail scrape. Gear up. Bring the lever back to neutral, put the safety cover back on, flaps up, there we go. We are off the ground in the MiG-21. I usually stay in burner for a bit to pick up some speed. That was the marker we just overflew, that beep beep beep. That's the RWR now. So if I overfly this marker station as well, you'll see the light come on. Right there. So we'll come out of burner now. Just bring it back to about 90%. Now, one thing you'll notice about the MiG-21 is very twitchy. It's very longitudinally unstable. This is a habit of MiG aircraft. The 29 is like this too. The nose bobs up and down a lot. The damper will sometimes counteract that. It will sometimes make it worse. It's easier to just fly it without the damper on, I find. So you were asking about the gun earlier. First of all, this switch pushka, that on, and then these three buttons, I'm just going to hit the auto level so I can talk without worrying about flying into the ground. These three buttons here, Перезарядка is reloading, 1, 2, and 3. There are 3 pyrotechnic charges. This is so fucking Russian. There are 3 pyrotechnic charges inside the gun that fire off and cock the gun under pressure of the explosion. Like, this is fucking metal as fuck, dude. So when you press this, bang, gun is cocked. This green light comes on, and you may notice the trigger is flipped down. So we now have a working trigger down there. So the gun's now armed. If that green light goes out, either you're out of gun ammo or the gun's been turned off. So if I turn that power switch off, I'll have to rearm the gun. You only have the 3 charges to do it with. So if you are on your 3rd charge and turn the gun off and then want it back on, bad luck. So yeah, that's that. Let's see if the radar will even turn on after I've left it on standby for so long. Yep, radar's on. Okay, so that green shit you see down the bottom is ground clutter. See if we can find something to lock onto. Another MiG-21 near Nalchik. Yeah, Jeff has the same gun. This one's mounted on the center line though. Below the aircraft on the center line, not offset like the Jeff. Oh, we got a hit on the radar. So, and it's fucking vanished. We're gonna level the aircraft off again. So this is a contact. It is above us. When the vertical dash is above, it means the target's above you. When it's below, it means the target's below you. When you see like a plus sign, it means that it's your altitude. If I hit my IFF interrogate, it comes back as an equal sign. That means friendly. Single dash is enemy, double dash is friendly. So we now know that's a friendly target. He's slightly above me, crossing a bit to the right of my nose, and he's currently about 15 kilometers away. 5 degrees right off my nose.